Doubt is something that artists, I think, live with constant. That's healthy. Something that's not met with challenge never really bears the fruit you want it to.
In 2002, a Chicago native had an idea. Hebru Brantley was studying film at Clarke University in Atlanta, but his true passion was in the visual arts of illustration and painting. A chance encounter at a campus flea market saw him sell his first painting to none other than friend and classmate DJ Drama. Overnight, Brantley found his calling and traded in his camera for a canvas. In the 2 decades since, he's challenged the art world's conventions with both his work and his attitude, secured the respect of his peers, and created a pantheon of characters beloved by a legion of fans that includes notables like LeBron James, Chance the Rapper, and Michael B. Jordan. And when he's not elbow deep in a can of paint, Brantley still finds time to collaborate with brands like Adidas and even return to cinema, directing a short for Netflix. And it all started with one idea.
How did your parents' professional life inform your creative aspirations?
My father worked for NBC, and my mother worked for JPC, which, is Ebony Jet. Mr. Johnson, she was his secretary, basically. And I didn't feel like goals were unobtainable. My mom nor my father never really were artistic, but my mom appreciated it adversely. Like, my father was very much like, yo, you go to school, you get good grades, and you get a good job, right? Like, this artist shit, that's not real. Like, you wanna do art? Okay, well, be an architect, right? That has art in it. You got a pencil in your hand at some point, right? But it was the opposite from my mother. It was like, oh, you like art? Okay, well, let's find this. Hey, you ever heard of Basquiat? You ever heard of Warhol? Warhol paints Superman. You ever see this? Hey, you ever got Keith Haring? So thanks to my mom, a lot of these things were put in front of me at an early age.
When did you start gravitating towards the arts yourself?
As a kid, the thing that I did most natural was, want to draw, color, create. I have these phases in my life. It's the Ninja Turtle phase and it's the Wu-Tang phase, right? And so, it was like, as a kid, you're mimicking the things you like, the Ninja Turtles and He-Man, and it's all of that, and it's innocent. And then Wu-Tang happened, and then it was like an awakening. I don't want to be a kid no more. These guys are doing a thing within music that, like, I can visualize, I can see, and they're taking elements of things that I grew up loving, cartoons, anime, kung fu flicks, Shaw Brothers shit, and hip hop, merging them all together. Why can't I do something similar in, a visual medium? Chicago wasn't a huge graffiti city, but we had it in pockets. And that was my way into doing art on a bigger scale. I never was really good at lettering, right? I was always better with, like, my character work, so if it's like a burner, I would do the character at the end or the beginning. But as the art started coming off the streets and into the galleries in that 80s movement, that was also sort of a great moment for me in terms of seeing how that works from an application standpoint, right? Like, these guys' main medium is spray paint, right? Spray paint isn't an easy medium to manipulate, right? But watching a guy like Dondi, both in the streets and in the gallery, I thought was really exceptional.
Is this just being on your teenage, having fun, expressing yourself, or are you thinking about where this is gonna take you?
At the time, no, man. I was just like, this is fun, right? Because there was no one set sort of archetype or pathway towards this thing, right? It was like, okay, you wanna be an animator, you wanna work in animation, that's one route, right? I wasn't good enough for that. You wanna be a comic book artist, wasn't good enough for that. My heroes looked weird as shit sometimes, different angles I had trouble with. But I knew that I really enjoyed creating my own stuff, my own characters and things like that. But there wasn't a North Star to point to. Again, design wasn't designed by then. Cause, right? Like, he wasn't caused then. So I was just kind of like, this is fun. This is what we doing. I think my biggest advantage as a creative is my upbringing, the things that I've experienced and being able to sort of work those into the things that I've created.
As an outsider looking in, I can see an aesthetic connective tissue between Common, Kanye's early stuff, Chance, and your work. And all of you guys came out of the South Side of Chicago. From your vantage, A, do you see that connective tissue? And B, what do you think that that comes from in particular?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I think it's the environment. You know, it's like how they say there's something in the water, right? The history in Chicago, especially the South Side, you know, dealing with the nation, you know, the Black Muslims, Jesse Jackson, you know, Fred Hampton, you know, Operation Push, right? We knew about those stories growing up. We understood that history. That was a part of our culture.
When you get to the end of high school, did you have a sense that you wanted to pursue art in a professional way?
Yeah, but my father, he didn't want me to suffer and starve. And so one of my other loves and passion has always been film. I think a compromise for the both of us was like, I can go to Clarke Atlanta. They had a film program, the undergrad program that Spike went through, Spike Lee. At least I can be on some crew doing something at some level, but I'll have a job, right? I'll be able to make a way. I always wanted to be a director, I think, because with my ignorance, like that was the job or the role on a film set that I understood pretty simple and plain, right? I didn't know what a cinematographer really did. You know, I understood it to a degree, but like to me, if a director sort of oversaw these things and brought the people together, put this thing together in a way, talk with that, like, okay, I can understand that.
And where did it go left?
Clark's film program wasn't as good as it maybe once was, but we'd have like market Thursdays and Fridays. So you set up a table, you didn't need a permit or anything, right on the promenade, sell whatever. Drum, he had a table selling his mixtapes. This is back like, you know, DJ Dramatic, hip hop love song mixtapes. And then I'd have a table next to him sometimes just selling, you know, t-shirts, jackets, trucker hats, like hand painted. It grew and grew and grew so fast, and that really helped put me through my last kind of 2 years of school. One of my biggest early supporters was always my guy, DJ Drama. You know, he was the first one, you know, put money up and bought a painting for me. That meant everything. That was, you know, supreme validation from a peer that what I'm doing, you know, resonates and it's worthwhile.
What year is this?
This is like 97, 98. It was more towards my like end of my junior year into my senior year when I started working for different production companies and directors. You know, hip hop had moved from New York down south, and so more opportunity to get work on a crew. Obviously, they found out I could draw, so I would be kind of placed in that box, like doing storyboards, doing concept art for things. And that was cool, but it just got to a point where like, there was no real challenge to it. You know, I was about to have my first kid. How am I gonna make money, right? I'm still fucking in school. I was working a job at a restaurant, and it just so happened that the restaurant was right across the street from the art college in Atlanta. So a lot of the art students worked at the restaurant, and they found out I could draw, so they started inviting me over to the school. And dude, it like opened my eyes. I had never been to art school proper. So it opened my eyes and it was like, holy shit, like this is how y'all have access to this 24/7. This is how y'all get down. And so I just started going as often as I could. Like I was living at the school to the point where like the staff, the janitorial staff, the security let me in, buzzed me in because they saw me over there all the time. They just assumed he goes here. You know, you got kids taking classes that are like, you know, painting one, drawing one, and that's not their focus, right? So they don't give a shit about, you know, painting supplies or something like that. So, you know, at the end of the semester, they're cleaning out lockers. And it's all this surplus of like half-used supplies. I, you know, pull the car up, take paintings, you know, paint over them, like half-painted paintings, you know, art supplies, big stacks of, you know, paper and whatever. And that really helped fund my sort of art education. You know, it wasn't like everything had to be a hit, right? I could miss, I could fail, and I didn't feel bad about it because I wasn't paying for it. Those 2 years became like my arts education. How do I know when to pivot? It's a feeling. You as the person, you know instinctively or should know instinctively sort of what feels right to you in that moment.
What were sort of the fundamental things that you walked away from that experience that you feel like have informed the decisions you made since?
just that I could do this, right? Like that there was something there beyond just a want.
Hebru began to gain confidence in his abilities, but he still needed to figure out how to sustain himself as an artist and what the content of his work would be. So he moved back to Chicago, reintegrated himself within his community, and searched for and eventually found his own visual language.
You get to the end of college, you now have a child and real financial obligations. Did you end up taking a 9-to-5 job, or did you go straight into being a full-time artist?
No, dude, I'm not a good employee, but I did for a second. Basically, glorified doorman, right? In like really expensive condo building in, on Peachtree in Atlanta. When you think of like a doorman, like a certain age, 40s, 50-year-old black guy, that's the whole crew. And then there's me, this young artist. And I was just bad at it. Like I had the night shift, there's cameras everywhere, and I would like draw. And after the first week, it was like, all right, Hebru, you gotta stop drawing. You gotta do your rounds, you gotta do this. Okay, I do that to find a camera angle, so I draw away from, the angles. And then these people drive on the lawn of the property. I let them go before the police get there, properly filing a report, so I got fired. Like, I hated the job anyway, and I just got to a point where it's like, as long as I'm creating and making something, I'm good. And so the next series of things that I did were all sort of in that space, and then teaching myself Photoshop, right? Atlanta's 20 parties a week, 40 promoters that need flyers. All right, I can make little ghetto flyers, put a little hot girl here, Photoshop her here with the champagne bottles and the car in the background, like No Limit album covers, right? Like one, I'm hustling, but two, this is also keeping me in that space, right? And I'm learning something. It's not necessarily the art that I want to do, but I'm learning how to do all this stuff.
Creating art takes a certain level of selfishness. Being a father takes a certain level of selflessness. How did you navigate that as you were trying to sort of cut your teeth and get these, your first sort of like foothold into the game?
I was coming out of school. My son's mom was going back to school. And so like I would have him during the days, whenever he's got his head to a pillow, I'm in the living room painting. I'm grateful for her because I think that, she understood my ambition and supported it. I never really got shit from her about that. Again, like my mom was in full support, right? And I didn't really know. I'm just doing a thing, constantly.
Did it create a sense of urgency?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can go another hour. I'll pass on that. I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna do this. And so it absolutely did, but it also brought about another motivation, which I didn't realize, or another thing where like having him allowed me to go back to being a child in certain aspects. Like sitting watching SpongeBob and not feeling a way about it. And then being able to like, as parents do, like, you want to hip your kids to like the stuff you grew up on. You fall back in love with those things and, those moments when, you were that age and that level of nostalgia. And that really helped unlock something for me. It was like, this is the truest version of me, right? And what I've been doing up until this point creatively hasn't been the full version. I became less afraid to give that to, the world, so to speak, or put that out there.
What was the path from there to getting your first show?
Even with shows early on, I wasn't reliant on a gallery or a gallery owner or, any sort of institution. I would go to galleries, I'd go to shows, I'd talk with gallery owners. I didn't really like that world, right? We didn't speak the same language. Some of the shit that they were talking about, I would try to remember keywords and go home like, what is this? How what the fuck does that mean? The thing I did understand was the presentation fact. It's like, have something you want to show, put on a show, and you show it. You open the doors. The most intimidating thing for an artist is to come to a blank canvas. I'll take a marker, I'll take a charcoal pencil, and I'll kind of just make some marks. And usually what I start out doing is completely opposite of what the end result is. In that space of always wanting to grow, always wanting to try different things, this is sort of what has kind of come from that. One of my oldest friends is an artist named Fahamu Peku. Fahamu was like the first artist I knew that had sort of broken through. Fahamu wasn't the guy to be like, yeah, I did it, ha ha ha. Fahamu was like, man, I did it, come on, let's go. He opened the door to bring me into that world and that space. And I had spent all this other time, just bubbling, cooking, learning, And so when that opportunity came, I was ready.
You knew how to paint and you knew how to make things, but figuring out the what or the why is, I think, probably the most challenging part for anyone, really, but a fine artist in particular.
Sure.
How did that sort of come into focus for you?
At the time, the perception of Black art was like, this is some shit that we're going to talk about, the slave fields, right? The old times before I existed, before they existed. We're going to do sort of like the jazz club scene, delve into some historical things and just sort of repurpose those memories, those moments. And that's kind of where things live. I came from the woman who worked for Johnson Publication, the first Black publication, pulling from that level of iconography, that level of Black history. That was my understanding of my style at the time, but it didn't feel uniquely my own. There was still room for growth and development. I've been focused on and thinking about really heavily survival and, the Black body, everything that's been happening throughout history, but more specifically the past couple of years. And like, what do you do? What can you do? And I think that the best thing that I can do as a visual artist and somebody with a platform is sort of, constantly be ever present and talking about those things and those issues in my own way.
What was that process of unlocking what you really wanted to say?
Again, it was like a lot of trial and error, creating these certain works, right? Again, like you have those ebony style pieces and some of them lean more into like figurative abstraction. And then I would have the character-based stuff, a little skewed more towards, animation and things like that. And I'm developing that language, at the same time. And attention from an audience went quickly from that to being intrigued by, not fully invested in like, oh, we love this, but like, that's pretty dope, man. That feels like you. That feels like something you need to explore and try to unpack.
How many years did that take?
Third or fourth year out of school is when I really started to lean into the notion of like making something that felt like my own, And that was also around the same time where like I had just moved back to Chicago. Not having seen a lot of these guys that I grew up with, not being around those people anymore, and them seeing me, seeing what I was up to, right? Letting them in on, these are my ideas, these are my thoughts, really helped accelerate that growth.
During this process that takes several years for you to arrive at what the world would ultimately know as Hebru Brantley style, you are still having to provide for yourself, for your son. How successfully are you making ends meet during that period?
Fairly. So at that time, I started teaching. I was teaching art at this spot on the South Side called Little Black Pearl, sort of an after-school thing. This was the first time I'm in an environment where like I have free reign over a studio. I can stay at this building as late as I want and get down, right? And so it allowed me freedom to stretch out. When you're not confined, and you can breathe a little bit, some dope shit's gonna happen. Going through my classes during the day, hanging around later at night, and just getting busy. Not only having that studio as a place to work in, but turning that studio into an actual piece of art. Going into the cafe, like, yeah, this wall is gross. Let's paint it. Go ahead, do a mural. Word? Okay, cool. All of these things is like, it's just strengthening my creativity and my understanding of my own voice. I felt confident enough from leaving that job to never having a job again. Right when I finally left the teaching job and going out on my own and doing my own thing, finally getting my first studio, making enough money to just survive off of the art. Like, my mom got sick. My mom had breast cancer. She beat it, went into remission, was fine, but it came back aggressive. In that process of her going to chemo and getting treatment, my stepfather finds out that he has pancreatic cancer. And so, that's a death sentence. And so what I have going on in my life is not as important right now as what my mom has to deal with. And, I'm waking up early, packing lunches, taking my brother and sister to school, picking them up from school, taking her to her treatments. And Shortly after, again, finding all this out, my stepfather passes. My mom's health, it never came back. And so I'm raising my siblings at this point, and it became harder to paint. Right around that time, I had an opportunity to do my first solo show in Chicago. So I'm working at night every night, painting my ass off. I'm literally, dude, I'm down to like just a few shekels now in the bank account because I've already left the job, but this thing happened right after that. And I'm putting everything I got into this work. The day of the show, my mom's never been to an art show because I'd had all my shows in Atlanta at the time, right? She has my brother and sister. She wasn't able to fly, to come to an art show. Like, man, it's everything to me. My dad's coming, my mom's coming. And dude, I'm driving my mom back from treatment and she literally, I can't make this shit up, she goes blind. And it's like temporary thing that happens sometimes with chemo. She loses sight for a couple hours. And it terrified me and it just put me in this, this place of panic. Soon thereafter, she passed away. So throughout my life, my mom never got to see me have an art show. I found myself in a crazy position of raising my own son and then now having full custody of my brother and sister as a visual artist, right? Like, I don't have a secure gig. There were bills. I had to focus on keeping us alive, thriving, surviving, the whole thing. I didn't have time to really grieve. It was just, I had to go.
Saddled with grief and new caretaking responsibilities, Hebru had no other choice but to continue to create and try to monetize his efforts. Luckily, his work resonated, and on the strength of his talent and his unique proprietary characters, like the iconic FLYBOY, he managed to build an audience and become one of the more buzzy names in the Chicago art scene. But his aspirations didn't stop there. Bent on bringing FLYBOY to the big screen, Hebru decided to set the table for this eventuality by returning to the world of film and directing his first short, E-Rax, for Netflix.
I had to think of ways creatively to take what I had to make something else. I'm pestering folks. I'm doing whatever I can to just stay away from having to take a fucking shitty 9-to-5 to help us live. And 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, a year, it's actually starting to work. Damn, I got this opportunity. Y'all gonna pay me how much? To do what? Oh, hell yeah. I'll do that 3 times over for that. Once I kind of got into the flow, it just became the norm. Again, man, being lucky, right? Like meeting certain people that are like, man, I believe in what you're doing. Here's a studio space. I don't want nothing from you. Give me a painting every now and then, but here's a space. Luck is the supporting character in my story, honestly. Just from being able to, be born a creative and not necessarily just being able to do a thing, but have a vision.
When did you paint your first pieces with the characters who I think we all most closely identify with you? The FLYBOY, the Frog guys, like all that.
The early 2000s. I don't really even remember what the absolute definitive first painting was. I can remember the first series of works where like there was enough to call it a series. That to me was sort of always imagined as a one and done proposition. Hell, some of the FLYBOYs or the characters at the time, they weren't black, they were, whatever color I had at the time, Some of them were gray, some were portrait toned, peach or whatever. But like watching how people respond. The next show had nothing to do with that stuff, but there was an expectation to see that stuff. And so, as an artist, again, I don't know, everybody's different, but for me, that was amazing. That means I did something that connected with more than just 1 or 2 people. It connected with, a broader audience, and people were expecting to see, a familiar face, so to speak. And so that was just, light bulb, obviously, moment of like, I got something here and I want to explore it further.
Take me through that process.
I get bored really easily. No matter if the idea is good, if I'm saying certain things that are really, I'm passionate about, shit just gets boring. It's repetition. It's like, So finding new ways to bring this thing to life. And so getting into sculpture really early on in my career and like going to YouTube and watching tutorials on like, how do I do sculpture? Failing miserably at it, right? But then, you know, trying to find those people that know how to do it and can help guide me. And so I started making like these 3D heads, these like wall-mounted heads, right? With FLYBOY and a few of the characters. The audience engages with them differently. And so I got into sculpture and then I got hooked on that and just wanted to do more and more. And then it was, from the heads, it was flying FLYBOY. A few years into the game, working, painting, not really having sort of an established visual voice yet. I had kind of landed on this book, you know, about, it's like world history, World War II, Tuskegee Airmen. I just thought there was a real power behind that, right? There was a real, you know, a real story there that like, it connected with me. And so I took it a step further and just started to think about like, you know, the canon of characters that already exist, the Batmans, the Supermans, the Bugs Bunnies, the SpongeBobs, and like, there was none that existed that were, you know, based off anybody of color, right? Really, within that space. So I kind of did a mock show where like I presupposed that there was one, right? There was something that sort of time forgot about, that's something that was unreleased. And so, you know, that's kind of how I arrived at, you know, this guy right here, my second son.
At what point did you feel like you had arrived in that virtuous cycle where one thing is leading to the next and you no longer have that fear of looking down?
I think when I'm at a position where I'm having dinner with the mayor of Chicago and he knows exactly who I am, what I do, feeling like I'm invited into, you know, another circle.
How is the work evolving as you are becoming more successful? It's, I imagine, creating a bit of a feedback loop where you're receiving praise, scrutiny for certain things, criticism. How is that changing what you're making?
I think I'm just more aware of like the audience, because there's a real audience. It's not just people coming to look at art, but it's people investing in your art, right? People living with your art. I think seeing what sells, listening to how people speak about this versus this. Again, just watching engagement. You approach things a bit smarter, you know, with a bit more experience and a bit more confidence each time because of those things. I think I have a lot of creative goals. I would like to, you know, create a few things in different mediums that stand the test of time and be a benchmark for the time in which, you know, I existed.
Being a pop artist and a commercial artist as well as a fine artist, it takes planning and strategy and thought about how you are cultivating your brand. When did you start thinking about that? Thinking not just about an individual painting or a collection of paintings, but a larger Hebru Brantley as a name and as a brand?
Very early on, I mean, it kind of goes back to like the days of me selling t-shirts on campus. Like Basquiat, right? I think a lot of young Black artists especially find Basquiat, his work becomes sort of a jumping off point to an understanding of fine art. And now the world is starting to like understand who this guy is. Now there's t-shirts, there's mugs, and it's like, this dude never got to see a check for any of that, participate in any of that, have any input in any of that. I wanna be able to take something from here and put it on a coffee mug, right? And somebody that can't afford that, and they can live with my art in their home. And this is again, the contradictory shit, the nature of the fucking art world, right? We're going to tell you that commercial art is not the way to go, that you shouldn't do that. But we're going to exploit dead artists and license their shit up the wazoo to sell you puzzles, postcards, books, t-shirts, etc. through our museum gift shop. And it's okay to do it there. But if you do it in any other arena, oh no, it's pop, it's bad, you're not supposed to do that. Fuck that. I'm a fucking creator. I'm gonna create, I'm gonna make the shit I wanna make, and I'm gonna put it out how I wanna put it out. I'm not saying every idea I have is great, every at-bat is a home run, but I get to control it, right? I get to control my shit the way I want to within my lifetime. I can't control how it's gonna come out when I'm dead and gone, but for right now, these are the things I think are cool, these are the things I wanna participate in, and so I do. I'm not caught up in this idea of like how that's gonna be perceived in the fine art world. Because a lot of it is bullshit. And I know this is not favorable and it's not something I should probably say publicly, but I just think it is. Art audience can be real fickle, meaning like not necessarily allow for change. And so for me, just trying to do it in a way where, you know, I can slowly walk you along into another room and, you know, before you know, oh, I'm in another room. This is actually cool too. I get this, I understand this. There was one moment where I had this studio. There's these Chinese artists that live in Chicago, obviously from China, the Zhao brothers. They had created a studio space for artists on the South Side in Bridgeport. I was like, man, I have to work in here. This environment is crazy, it's great. And so I got my first real studio, like that wasn't associated with work, that's where my studio space was. On the first floor, they had a gallery, huge gallery, but it was a gallery for masters. You know, they would invite, you know, a master marbleist that, you know, did these incredible marble statues, and that's what they would show. It was a complete disconnect with obviously the other tenants in the building, but, you know, it brought in the folks, they sold work, etc. And so I kept bugging them, like, man, you need some young blood in here. I was like, no, it's a rule. I'm like, whose rule? It's like, it's our rule. I was like, well, rules can be broken, right? Like, and so over the course of like 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, they started seeing, like, we would have open studios, and they started seeing that, like, when it's time for everybody to leave, everybody's still back in my studio, looking at my stuff, talking. It's a, you know, it's a movement. It's the energy's there. It's undeniable. And so I convinced them to give me a show, and they did. My first big solo show in a real gallery. That was like the first big FLYBOY show. You know, it was like publications, write-ups, you know. The show was supposed to go for a month. It went for 2. You know, the work sold the fuck out. But with that show, I not only just did the show, but exit through my gift shop. I got t-shirts, you know, I've got little collectible figurines. I've got hats, hoodies, stickers, posters, prints, all of that. And like, I sunk everything I had into that show, and it proved to be a success.
At what point did Hollywood start coming and knocking on your door on potential adaptations of these characters?
I'd say within like the past 5, 6 years, right, where Michael B. Jordan had come to Chicago working on some film, but saw my art, connected with it, and just hit me on Instagram. And we started talking, and you know, at this time, his stock is rising. I think he's about to do Creed, and you know, it's like he's becoming, you know, Michael B. Him having the connections here started to like throw my names around in meetings. It just allowed me to see that like I have something that can live beyond this space and potentially in another space.
So people are kicking the tires on you to see what's up with your characters, but ironically, your first foray into Hollywood ends up being a live action short that you direct for Netflix.
Yeah.
Right? How did that happen?
It was during the pandemic. You know, I shot a few music videos for some friends and, you know, sort of got the bug back and really wanted to do more. And I was gonna just shoot a little short film at the house, you know, something I wanted to do with my daughter. I just introduced her to Gremlins. It was eye-opening for her. She's 7. I got a call from my agent that Netflix was doing this emerging filmmaker program. They wanted me to pitch a few ideas, and so I did, and one of them happened to be the idea that I was gonna do with my daughter, which was called A-Traks. They loved it, they wanted to do it, and, you know, we made it happen.
Will we see FLYBOY on the big screen anytime soon?
We will. I don't know how soon, but I know it's coming. You know, it's something that I've been working towards for a long time now, and I think that like opportunities are there and obviously growing. It's just about sort of aligning with the right one.
Is it difficult to pursue opportunities like that and retain ownership of the IP for the characters?
It's extremely difficult because, you know, obviously for studios, they want to own everything outright. You know, unless you're like J.K. Rowling, where it's like you have a successful, mega successful book series, and then, you know, you have leverage there. And for me, having had success in a space, selling merch and things based around this IP, definitely helps when having the conversation of how percentages work and things of that nature.
I would imagine just dealing with the administration of Hebru Brantley as a brand is a full-time job. And on top of that, you are still in the studio painting works by hand every day while you are meeting with agents and talking to studio execs and talking to collectors and doing all of that stuff and developing your IP into new extensions. How do you sort of navigate managing your schedule and prioritizing, how you spend your time?
The main thing is I have a really strong team, of people around me that are able to help with that. The creative still falls on me, but I'm a very ambitious person, always have been, and I think that while the pendulum still swings in my favor, I want to try to jump at those opportunities and sort of seize the moment. We are in a real moment right now. For Black creatives, you look at Hollywood, right? The dominant stories that are being told are from our perspective. In the fine art world, I don't know what happened, but the gatekeepers finally figured out that Black is dope. Black is the new Black. It's a real moment that hopefully will continue, but while we're in it, I want to be able to participate.
So what is the bucket list?
Obviously continuing painting, that'll never stop. Bigger shows, more experiential exhibitions, not just white walls and paintings, but you're going into an experience. And then on the other side is to, exploring animation, from shows to features, live action films, directing some, producing some. All of these things are slowly being set up. I like to tell stories, so be able to tell stories here, in a two-dimensional sort of space to, actually with live actors or, in an animated space, I think is all different pieces of a whole.
As the visibility goes up and the stakes go up, does it get easier?
No, it's never easy. You just get more accustomed to the chaotic nature of it all. You know what I mean? It's I know what I do isn't suited for a lot of people or how I do certain things, but this is the only way I know how to do it.